Hey, good morning and welcome to Breakthrough Walls. I'm Ken Walls and I'm your host. And today I have the one and only Mr. Brad Hart on the show. So stay with us. And we're back. Let me bring Brad on. Brad, welcome to the show.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for having me, Ken. And I appreciate everybody for listening. I hope you get something out of this conversation today.
Hey, man. I've been doing this now for a little over 3 years. I've interviewed over, I don't even know, 370 plus celebrities and entrepreneurs. And sounds like you've got one heck of a story. I'm excited to hear it. So why don't we start with you telling everybody where you were born and raised?
Sure. So I grew up on Long Island, which is a little community east of New York, about 2 million people. And my father was a lumber truck driver. My mom she worked in delis and eventually became a court officer. Dad got hurt when I was about 2 years old and had to quit his job. So he was driving his lumber truck and a load shifted while he was driving down a hill and it smashed into his back, went right through the back of the cabin. Yeah, it was a pretty nasty injury. So he was on he couldn't walk for about 6 months. He was getting around on a mechanics roller, which is pretty interesting. He during that time of his life, he created a lot of art. So we still have some of it. Like he did this one felt board with pins in it, and then you'd wrap colored twine or string or whatever, thread around it. And he made a peacock. I was like, this is pretty cool. I don't even know if you can make those anymore. I'm not sure what it's called, but yeah, stuff like that. And he eventually got the surgery so that he could walk again, but he was never not in pain again. So he had sciatica and terrible problems his whole life. So he's never able to go back to work, which left us, on basically subsistence income. So now we're living on Social Security, disability. He was hurt when he was like 37, 38. So about my age now. And he was a young kid, about 2 years old. My mom, the deli, wasn't cutting it. So she decided to go back and get a better trained job. So she became a court officer, which led her to have to move to the city where she met my stepfather. And eventually their marriage didn't go so well. But, they stayed together on paper for me so that I would have a home to live in. And she, provided for us, but she was never around. So I was very independent, very, had to take care of myself kind of kid. I had to do all the dishes and take out the trash and mow the lawn, do all the things around the house. And, the kids in my neighborhood, like, I don't know a lot of you what age you are, but you probably remember a world where there's no internet, if you're at least my age. And growing up in that and now seeing the world today, it's a very different thing. Like if you grew up in the world without the internet, you didn't meet people unless they lived in your neighborhood or kind of the surrounding towns.
Yeah.
Right? If somebody lived in Nassau County. I lived in Suffolk County. I would never meet them. Never once. Right.
Right.
And, places like California or Europe, or places that I've been to and traveled since were just insane. So like I'm 8 years old. I remember very distinctly being on the swings at school and, I'd been beat up by bullies and had all kinds of, going back and forth between friend groups and all kinds of problems. I just remember thinking I didn't have a friend in the world and dreaming and praying one day that would become a reality, that anywhere I travel to, I'd know somebody. And it took a while, a couple decades, but I finally got to a place in my life where I feel like I know people all over the world. I've been able to travel and meet people. And all of that for me was a function of doing mastermind groups, right? Being a part of these mastermind groups. And I didn't really discover that until my mid-20s, but it changed my entire life. So it's really a huge part of my story. So I'll kind of jump ahead and then I'll come back if that makes sense.
So let me ask you though, like, you had what age was it when you inherited the stepfather situation?
Yeah. So I was about 5 and I remember very distinctly. Yeah. My mom and dad were arguing and my mom was being weird, like surreptitious for some reason. I couldn't figure out why. She was being kind of evasive. And she took me to the deli parking lot where she worked, and the deli was closed. And there's this guy sitting there with a mustache who I'd never met. It was very strange, kind of meeting. And she's like, this is Tom. He's my new friend that we've been hanging out. And I'm like, what? Like, wow. 5-year-old kid. You're like,
you did. Yeah. You did at 5. You don't get
and
that.
God bless Tom, man. I mean, my mom's had so many problems over the years and I don't want to get into that in public. It's not right. But He's been there every step of the way, helping her with any challenges that she's faced. So I'm so grateful for him. And he's been there for me. He's been my dad longer than my real dad has been my dad at this stage of my life. So I'm just so grateful that he is there. But in the beginning, I didn't give him any credit. I didn't cut him any slack, because I was this, very independent, frustrated, just stubborn kid that didn't want any help from anybody, because I couldn't rely on anybody, it felt like, and that's where it was.
When you were a kid, did you I don't know if you were like me or not. I was from a very poor family and decided at a very young age I needed to make money.
Oh yeah.
I figured it out.
You saw, right? You saw the whole world suffering because of lack of money.
Yeah, right.
So you start to realize, like, wait a second, if I could just solve this money piece, because I knew there were rich people. I understood that was a possibility. I didn't know any, or at least I didn't think I knew any, because none of them, ostensibly were wealthy. Nobody lived in massive houses. Nobody drove fancy cars. It's just a very working class neighborhood. A lot of people drove for FedEx or worked at a deli or, were a mechanic or something blue collar. So it wasn't until I was about 16 that I realized that anyone in my family ever had or did have wealth. And the way that came about was pretty interesting. So my grandfather was a World War II veteran. He fought in the Pacific Theater. He was a supply sergeant. So his job, he was older when he got drafted. So he would type and he would take care of, things that, people needed along the lines and whatnot. And basically when he was going into the nursing home in his 80s, he decided to leave his money to my father early so that he could, transition into this home without it cleaning him out. Because nursing homes, if you don't know, are very, very expensive. They can charge you up to $2,000 a day, and I don't care how much money you have, you're going to go broke eventually doing that.
Right.
So we wanted to put him on Medicaid, and it was up to me to help my father, who didn't have any real financial education. Basically didn't even have a bachelor's degree. He went to some college, but he became a lumber truck driver. So not a Wall Street hedge fund titan or anything like that.
Yeah, right.
He inherits what turned out to be about $2 million. And we had no idea that my grandfather had all his money. We're like literally calling up all these brokerages trying to figure it out, because grandpa's uncle, my great uncle, Uncle Al, had invested in like Standard Oil and Bell Telephone and never sold it, gave it to my grandfather. That became 25 different oil and gas and telecom companies, all the ones we know today. And he was living off the dividends. And we didn't really get it, because he would drive new cars, but he wouldn't like be ostentatious about it. Like you get like a new Buick every 5 years, right? And he had his house paid off, and like he would take us out to lunch every week, but we didn't have any outward signs of wealth except for he would pay for things in cash. And
he didn't buy you a new Ferrari.
No, nothing like that. So grandpa was like the kind of guy that every 2 days he would go down to the store, you'd get a carton of cigarettes. Yeah. And he would get a bottle of Gentleman Jack, and 2 days later he'd go back and do it again. He'd smoke 5 packs of cigarettes a day and drink half a bottle of whiskey. And that was just his existence for 2 decades that I was alive, that he was alive during my life. So it was really interesting to see, how this person so close to us, who I knew and respected and looked up to, had so much money and we had so little, and it wasn't a big deal to him. Like it was just part of his reality versus our life, which was kind of subsistence, right? It was really hard.
Yeah.
If I wanted anything beyond, food and shelter, I really had to work for it. It's ever since I was age 12. So like age 12, I wanted a guitar, went out and started mowing lawns. That was my first business. And I marketed for leads, and I generated sales, and I delivered the service, and I became an entrepreneur kind of unwittingly, not knowing what that was, just because like I was tired of there's not enough money for anything that we want. Yeah. So that became kind of the course of my life. And then I just got better and better jobs based on the opportunities I would see. So like we used to hear pop, pop, pop out in the woods. And I always thought it was hunters, but I never put together there's actually a shooting range on the other side of the woods from where I lived, which was probably a mile away. But I just never knew that there was a freaking shooting range. Yeah, it was like skeet and trap range and a rifle range, literally within earshot. But I didn't know it was there. That's like how,
wow,
insulated you are in this neighborhood.
And I've never been to Long Island. I've flown into LaGuardia and JFK,
which is technically part of New York City, but it's on the same landmass.
But I've only been to Manhattan one time, and I drove from Ohio over there for a business meeting. Then I had other stuff.
Ohio.
What's that?
Very different than Ohio.
Oh, dude. And so I've never been to Long Island. I hear, but I think probably from television or whatever, when I think of Long Island, I think house. Like they're all stacked on top of each other.
That's a more Nassau
about a shooting range through the woods, man.
That's a more Nassau stereotype. It's very, densely populated. a lot of Jewish and Italian influence. That's where you get that accent. A lot of people say, why don't you have a Long Island accent? I kind of do around certain people in certain situations, but it's not as heavy and thick as some of the people from Nassau County, because we live way out east, like 2 hours from the city. Like, it's pretty far. So long story short, that's where I grew up. It was pretty interesting. And it was like a lot of racial and gang warfare. There's a lot of like white supremacist gangs and skinheads and, black and Hispanic gangs and like all this crazy stuff. Cause the school districts on Long Island, the way they were set up, had like tens of thousands of kids. They were enormous school districts, some of the biggest in the country, like Wyandanch and, Longwood and Sachem. They were like massive school districts. So you'd bus in kids from all these different neighborhoods that were all different races and post-economic levels. And it was really interesting. My mom didn't want me to have anything to do with that. She went to Longwood and witnessed like race riots in the hallways and shit like that. She didn't want anything to do with that. So she put me in Catholic school after like elementary school, basically. So from middle school on, I went to Catholic school. I hated it. I didn't want to be a part of it. I barely graduated. But she got me out of that situation, which I think was ultimately for the best, because there were some pretty gnarly influences around me. Like one kid murdered 3 people and he's still in jail, and another guy died. And like, there's all kinds of stuff that happened when I was a kid. And I still get nervous, like even driving around my old neighborhood, because it's just so much nonsense that, I used to get bullied a lot and I used to get beat up, and, I'm just thankful I didn't get killed. There's a lot of weird situations we found ourselves in with that. So even then I knew something was up, like not having anything to compare to, but you kind of just take it as normal because that's where you grew up. Right.
Right.
You don't think that's odd.
So is that where you like graduated high school and all that?
So I graduated from a little Catholic school. It's not there anymore. It's called Mercy High School. I was like 30. I think there's 35 kids in my graduating class.
Really?
Played football on the football team. We had our best year ever that year, even though I didn't play much. I think we went 5-3, which was like a huge accomplishment to have a winning season for a tiny little school. So I went to school. I didn't do great in high school, but I got better in college. I got a 4.0 in my community college. But like I said, I was always getting these entrepreneurial jobs. So like the reason I found out about the shooting range is one of my friends down the street had got a job there and he was making money in like tips. And I'm like, whoa, tips. This is crazy. Like they give you extra money on top of what you make. So like, I remember the first time I got a $20 tip working at the shooting range because they got me a job there. And that was like game changer for me. And I was like obsessed with what did this guy do where you could just hand $20 bills out. This is wild. He owned a Meineke dealership. And I'm like, come show me your Meineke dealership. Like I was so excited to just learn about how can I get out of this grinding effing poverty.
And this is at what age?
I was probably 13, 14, 15 in that range,
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm like basically learning how to shoot and then becoming a range instructor. That was like how I would make more tips, and I would pull targets for people and reload the houses and teach people how to shoot and make sure they were safe. I've been hit by buckshot a few times and pellets a few times, it's kind of crazy.
That hurts.
That's what I did in the beginning of my life. But I also worked in restaurants. I was a busboy. I worked on an ambulance. Like whatever the best job I could get that paid the most money is what I would go for. And eventually I landed on bartending, which put me through college. That was like my biggest earning job, believe it or not. I started when I was 18, 19.
Is that where you learned how to talk so fast?
Yeah, well, Long Island, we talk fast. That's one thing for sure. New York especially, it's very quick.
I'm from Ohio, man. It's like
I got to slow it down. It was funny because Ken and I were kind of BSing before the show, and he's like, we only got an hour for this. Is that gonna be enough time to tell your story? I'm like, well, I can tell it in 15 minutes if you need me to.
Yeah. Well,
morning, Jennifer. I like everybody watching.
One of the things, look, this show is called Breakthrough Walls, and it's about, sharing your story, but sharing the pain too, because the pain is everybody goes through the pain. And unfortunately, Brad, some people get stuck in the pain and stay there for life. And, I grew up poor also, and I mowed lawns. I did all that stuff. But like when you were in college, you ended up bartending. I mean, did you have challenges along the way? Like,
sure.
Oh God, I can't pay the rent or whatever. Like,
yeah. So thankfully my dad, he had inherited that money. So I had a part of my life where we had nothing. And then I had a part of my life where we had something. It wasn't endless. My dad was like giving out money to me and my cousins and different people. And he rented a beach house every summer. So he kind of lived high on the hog. He bought cars. By the time I was 24, I had been working in real estate for a couple of years, and that was where I really took off. So like I got my bartending job that fell apart with the financial crisis because a lot of our clients were bankers. So like that all dried up. I used to be making $400 or $500 a night. It went away pretty much as soon as Lehman and Bear and all the banks that were within walking distance to my bar went under. So they were, I went from making $100K a year almost in cash to almost nothing, not being able to pay my rent. Had this nice apartment in Midtown, had to move up to Harlem, downsize, eat into my savings, couldn't figure it out, couldn't get another bartending job, which was a blessing. I didn't want to stay a bartender. But I pounded pavement for weeks. I ended up from, Upper West Side, Upper East Side, for people who know Manhattan geography, pounding pavement all the way down for 2 weeks to literally I got to Broad Street. I was almost at Wall. I was almost the end of the island. Wow. And I saw this ad on Craigslist where they were hiring brokers to train, right? Hiring people to sell stocks. And I thought to myself, well, I read a quote by Warren Buffett: when people are running out of the room, you should be running into the room. I'm like, what's the best time to get in on Wall Street? Is not when everything's crazy and people are making tons of money. It's when it's kind of down and there's people, afraid. So get in there and start buying stocks and doing the things that we're doing. So I'll never forget this. I went to the office of this asset management firm. I have no idea if it's still there. It was 44 Wall Street, 9th floor, E1 Asset Management. And I walked in, I talked to the senior broker, and they hired me. Right. Okay, great.
What qualifications did you have?
0 qualifications. I was just hungry and I talked fast, and they liked that. Because you see guys walking around the office in their slick suits and their earpieces, pitching Visa stock, whatever they're pitching at the time.
So actually this is like real life Wolf of Wall
Boiler Room, exactly like Boiler Room, but on
Boiler
Wall Street,
Room.
right?
Yeah,
it wasn't on some, in that movie, it's out on Long Island. And
did he throw his Ferrari key at you?
No, nothing like that. They're just like, hey, you want to make money? This is where we learn to make money. This is where all the money of the world passes through this street. I'm like, okay, you told me, right? So, all right, what's my job? You're going to go in this office with brick walls, no windows, and you're going to call 500 people in the morning from 6 a.m. to noon. And then you're going to take a half-hour break. Then you're going to call 500 people from,
oh my God,
noon to 12:30 to 5 or whatever. And some people would stay and call Asia at night, So I would call the UK in the morning. I would call the US in the afternoon. And then people would stay and call Asia at night. I decided to hedge my bets and get a real estate license. I only lasted on Wall Street for like a month. I couldn't do that job anymore. I didn't want to become a broker. I saw these guys just were devoid of all, they were very one-dimensional. Let's put it that way. I remember my favorite quote from that time was somebody asked my senior broker or whoever was in charge, maybe it was a partner, I don't remember, what would you do if you woke up tomorrow and you had $10 million in your bank account? He said, well, first I'd wonder where the rest of my fucking money went.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Holy crap.
So there you go. That's
kind
of how it was. Wow. So long story short, like I got my real estate license at night. I got recruited by this firm called Bond New York, 2 guys from Philadelphia, Bruno and Noah, that really took a liking to me. And I was good on the phones at this point because I had been rejected so many times. I mean, that's just the only reason I'm good at anything, is because I'm stubborn. I keep trying. So I got hired. I got put in an office in Midtown, this beautiful office overlooking, Columbus Circle and Central Park. Had views of that. It was really cool. And they put me in charge of people after a while. I got like 5 promotions in 2 years. So I had a team of, after 2 years, I had a team of like 6 people working under me. I had 5 promotions. I learned how to market. I learned how to sell. I learned how to negotiate. I learned how to advertise, like all these different skills that were entrepreneurial that I had never done before in an environment that supported that. Right. So It was really just, can you rent apartments and get broker fees? And at the time it was rough in New York City. So typically in a good in a good market, rather, you have the brokers are being paid by the tenants. That's how New York works, right? They pay you up to 2 months, or at least it did at the time, of rent to get this apartment. And you work with the landlords, and they only work with brokers. They have this basically unpaid workforce that goes out and advertises and markets their apartment. It doesn't work anywhere else in the world. I'm not even sure it still works in New York, but at the time that was kind of the thing, because like half the rental real estate was owned by 5 big families, basically.
Yeah, right. Wow.
So it was wild. So I worked for them for a while. And at the end of 2 years, I'm on my way to Long Island to visit my mom. I remember it was May 9th or 10th or whatever. It was Mother's Day. And I got a call on my cell phone, like 2 stops from my station. I was on the train, and it was a cop saying, hey, is this Brad Hart? Your father's passed away. I said, oh man, I was really in shock. So like, okay, I'll get there as soon as I can. So here I am. I'm going to visit my mom. It's, a normal Sunday. I'm actually making money at this point. I'm in a pretty good place, starting to pay down debts and figure out my transgressions of the previous years and live my life. But I'm overweight. I'm burned out. I'm tired. Like I've been working really hard for a long time. And my dad passes away all of a sudden. And I realized, at that moment, obviously I was dealing with family and a lot of other things, that a few things. Well, thing one was, life's not forever. He was only 61 when he passed. He wasn't in great health. He was an alcoholic, but that's pretty young to die, especially when his parents were in their 90s, when they passed. Second thing was he had whittled that $2 million he had inherited 8 years earlier to about $500,000. Now, 2008 had happened in that in that purview too. So it wasn't all his fault, but you know, he had been burning a lot of cash and selling stocks and things like that. If he had lived another 3 to 5 years, I think he would have been pretty much broke. So there was that. And then also he had been kind of rent rolling my cousins and giving away money to people I didn't know and just strangers and helping out, you know, his bum friends that he knew his whole life. And that's all fine. If that's what you want to do with your money, it's your money. But it wasn't like, you know, it wasn't super productive, right? It wasn't what I would have been doing with the money, given my background and given my respect for money and how I grown up, right? He was doing his best with what he knew at the time. And I felt a responsibility given the history that my family had, because my great grandfather was apparently way more wealthy than my grandfather. That's why he had any money to begin with, and his uncle. So like there was a generational gap between the wealth that they had and the land that they had back, you know, 4 generations prior to my grandfather, who was well-to-do, but not crazy mega wealthy, to my father, who was basically broke his whole life, except for that last few years. And then myself, who grew up with nothing. Right. And my thought was, how can I rebuild this? And I thought that would solve all our problems. Right. So Wall Street was the way, real estate was the way. And I kind of combined those ideas into this idea of, you know, stocks and you know, investing. My first big stock win, I would say, would be 3D printing stocks. So at the time, and now 3D printing is more of a household thing, but at the time, nobody knew about it. And I had this opportunity to go to a mastermind all right, let me start with the mastermind journey, because I think this will color this whole thing. So I met Tim Ferriss at a gym in 2009 in New York City. I was on my lunch break. I was working on Mercer Street at the time. I walked over to Cooper Square, went to the New York Health and Racket Club there. And there's 2 people in the gym that day. It was myself and Tim Ferriss. And I looked at him. I'm like, "You're Tim Ferriss." He's like, "I am." I'm like, "Cool, man. I've read your book like 7 times. This 4-Hour Workweek book is amazing." Right.
Yeah.
And he wasn't like the 800-pound gorilla of social media and, you know, top podcaster he is today, but he was still pretty famous in some circles. So yeah, he's very good, nice guy, really cool. Yeah. He just, you know, shot the shit with me for 15 minutes. He even came and found me afterwards. "Hey man, it was great to meet you. I hope our paths cross again." He's just a really nice guy. And wow. On Long Island, and yeah, he grew up in East Hampton, and we talked about that. So yeah, really nice guy, really excited to meet him. And, you know, didn't have his phone number, nothing, just, you know, cool experience, right? Cool story, bro. 2 years later, his other book comes out. You know, so my dad died, all this other stuff happened. 2 years later, his other book comes out, The 4-Hour Body. And he did this giveaway thing where it's like, if you buy this many books, you get this, whatever, right? And the top thing was, if you buy 1,000 books, you can go to Africa or India, or we'll take you to some country and do like a 10-day thing with Tim. And I was like, this is really cool. And I had met, I hadn't met at this point. I called up Charlie, who was running his director of special projects, Charlie Hone, who is a friend of mine now for a decade. And Charlie's like, "Hey, a lot of people want these trips, but they're not people that Tim wants to spend time with for 10 days. He doesn't even know them." Right.
Right.
You guys met that one time in the gym. He remembers you. You know, you guys seem cool. Do you want to do one of these trips? I'm like, all right. And I just gotten some money from my dad passing away. I'm like, sure, why not? Let's go to Africa. I don't know when the hell else I'm going to go to Africa and see the safari. Like, I hadn't traveled really anywhere at this point. I had been to Italy with my parents, and we had stayed in the hotel and like done cafe hallway, because she kept getting ripped off by all the, like, she got pickpocketed on the bus, and like we would go to the restaurant and she would want cheese on her clams, and they would kick her out, and like, you know, the ATM, it stole 500 euros from us. They're like, "We're not going out of the hotel. We're going to buy food at the grocery store. We're going to sit in our hotel. We're going to do cafe hallway." And I'm like, this is not the way to see Rome. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Out of the country. I got a passport for this, and we barely left the hotel. It was hilarious.
That's terrible.
And stuff. That was what you wanted to see. So that was funny. Yeah. So anyway, so now I'm in Africa with Tim frickin' Ferriss and Charlie and Lila Janah, rest in peace, and Samasource. And they're doing all this incredible charity work over there and helping people get jobs. And her book, Give Work, is really amazing if you want to check it out and hear about her mission. She's one that we lost too soon. She's an incredible soul. She basically in her lifetime lifted 50,000 people out of poverty. It was incredible. And wow. You know, like a saint, basically. This woman is incredible. She never stopped working. She died. She's my age. She died a few years ago. And she wrote this book called Give Work. But at the time, she was doing the Samasource thing, which is her charity, in Nairobi. So we went to visit her. We saw their work that they were doing. We also went on safari and traveled around and saw like some of the different things that were going on the
Serengeti. And this whole time you're just hanging out with Tim Ferriss.
Yeah, for 10 days, right? So I'm hanging out with Tim. And
did you get his cell phone number?
Yes and no. We'll talk about that in a second. So we did this 10-day trip. Yeah. We're traveling all around Africa. It was really fun. It was like a really cool trip. Me and Charlie we met some girls locally and wandered off their place and slept under, we missed the mosquito net memo. So we ended up getting malaria on that trip. On the way home, I almost got trampled by donkeys because we're going through these little narrow streets, and these donkeys like charged us in the middle of the night because we startled them. We didn't know what the hell we're doing. We're just trying to find our way by the light of the moon. There's no lights or like anything in this town. So I almost got trampled by donkeys, got malaria, got to play golf with like the president and general of Kenya. They were like yelling at us in Swahili because we sucked and they wanted to play through, and we're wearing these ridiculous bright pants because you couldn't go in shorts. We didn't bring like jeans or anything nice to Africa. So I had to borrow Tim's bonobo pants. So here I am on like this 5-star prodigious Nairobi golf course with like all these dignitaries and presidents and generals and stuff. And I'm wearing these ridiculous blue pants and this crazy sun hat, the whitest guy for 800 miles. It was just nuts. So we did all that. And at one point during the trip, Tim sits me down and he says, "What do you want to do with your life?" And I was geeking out on 3D printing stocks at the time. I was telling him about that. And he's like, "You know what you should do? You want to go to North Korea?" I said, "North Korea?" I said, "What the hell would I go to North Korea for?" He's like, "Ah, you're young. You want to go travel. My friend's doing a trip there. It's part of this mastermind group. I think you'd be a great addition to it. You can check it out." I'm like, "Well, who's your friend?" He's like, "I can't tell you." I'm like, "All right, well, are you going to North Korea?" He says, "Nope." So why do I want to go to North Korea? Like, I don't want to be at the whim of a third world dictator. So I punked out. I said no. And I get home, I'm back in New York, and maybe this is a couple months later. I dealt with all the malaria stuff. I went to the hospital. By the way, they couldn't treat me. I waited to get treated after being sick for like days, traveling back, get to the hospital in America. They sit me in a ER room for 6 hours. They put some fluids in me and they say, "Yeah, nobody in this hospital has ever treated malaria before." I'm like, "Wait, I should have just went to the hospital in Nairobi. They treat it all the time, right?"
Oh my
or in
God.
England, where I had to do a layover, but like it was
they didn't treat you?
Yeah, they didn't treat me. They gave me fluids and sent me home. They said, "Just keep taking your pills, your Malarone pills." I'm like, yeah, they did a whole lot of good in the first place.
Wow.
But they sent me a bill, $5,000. I'll never forget that.
Oh my God. Wow.
Yeah, I had to fight with them. I'm like, "Guys, come on now. This is crazy. Your doctors told me they couldn't help me. Like, you don't get a bill for $5,000 after you're telling me, sorry,
when you didn't even do
I'll pay for the fluid bags, but that's it, you know?"
Yeah, right.
We worked it out. So yeah, so that was crazy. But it turned out that the guy who ran this mastermind in North Korea was Neil Strauss, who's another famous author who I'd met because I'd gone to a conference years ago, but I didn't put 2 and 2 together that it was Neil and Tim were friends and all that. So I get back and I hear about this crazy trip they went to North Korea, and like the president can't go to North Korea. It's like a really crazy place that nobody can travel to. And they have all these stories and nutty things. And there's only like 50 members in this mastermind. So I decided to join. I think I was like the 55th member. And I meet all these amazing people from all over the world. It's all men. And eventually that mastermind grew to like 100 people, and then like different tiers and local chapters and a membership. And I think he had like 1,700 people doing $4.5 million in revenue after a while. I think he's still doing it for all I know. We haven't talked in a bit. He's pretty busy. But yeah, so I joined this mastermind. This is the first time I ever been around people who were like 7, 8, even 9-figure earners. You know, one guy owned like the 3rd largest rolling paper company in the world. We're still friends to this day. You know, it was insane. Like partners at massive accounting firms like Deloitte and people who were 10, 20, 30 years my senior, but they're all men and they're all successful.
Right.
So here I am. I'm surrounded by people that like make you level up. Right.
Yeah.
But they all have their own demons, and obviously they're working through their stuff, you know? So it was just this really interesting time in my life where I'm growing so fast and I've got some money, right? I've been saving, and then I inherited a bit from my dad, and I want to like put this money to work. So this
one quick question.
Sure.
Throughout this story, I'm not hearing mention of siblings.
Oh yeah, I'm an only child.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, only child.
So you said your dad had about $500,000 left.
Yep.
And that's what you inherited.
Yeah, that and a house that I should have sold immediately. It was pretty beat up. And putting more money into the house I ended up selling it for 7 years
that
later.
House right now would probably sell for 3 times what it was for.
Yeah, if you could have held it. Well, the problem with Long Island houses, especially, and why there's so many on the market, especially now, and like in foreclosure and things, is the taxes are nuts. Like 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 a year in some cases.
Jeez.
So here I am. I got this 2-bedroom ranch that maybe is 1,200 square feet, and I'm paying $10,000 a year in tax, which was insane at the time.
Wow.
So yeah, that was one thing. And then renting it, we barely make any money because of the tax. And then, you know, all the bills that went into, like my grandparents and my uncle and my dad, they all smoked. So like, we had layers of nicotine and just crap on the walls. It was pretty brutal. So, you know, fixing all that up and keeping ahead of it was tough. You know, they built the house for $10,000 in the 50s. The land was probably more valuable. Yeah. And I got screwed on that. I won't tell that story right now, but the land was like parceled out in a weird way. And it was supposed to be subdividable. And then the 2 lawyers I talked to said I couldn't subdivide it, that it was mishandled earlier on. And then they ended up building 2 houses on it anyway. So I never got the whole story, but I got screwed out in that
Wow.
deal.
So anyway, sorry. So I didn't mean to throw you off track.
All good.
Back to the mastermind. And what was the investment? I love
like
people,
$10,000 a year.
Yeah. Because I get these people that want to pick my brain and yet they don't want to pay for brain picking. I'm like, there's 53 years of experience in this brain. You got to pay for that.
I have a no brain picking policy.
I know, right? I put a button on my
coffee
website.
Dates. You can't buy me lunch. I'm sorry. I've got my own food. But hey,
Right. So okay, you're in the mastermind.
Hey, read my book.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, long story short, I got into 3D printing stocks. It was the first thing I really won at. And I got this opportunity through this mastermind that my friend in the mastermind, he had a column in Forbes, and he said 3D printing is really interesting. And I had also attended a mastermind with Sir Richard Branson where I talked to him about it, and he was like, this is really interesting. So I was really excited about the idea. By the way, Virgin Galactic just got FAA approval to bring, or whatever the administration is, to bring people to space. That's a big deal. The stock just went crazy. So congrats, Sir Richard. I doubt you're listening, but that's amazing. So yeah, I meet him. I talked to him about the story, the whole deal. Didn't get his emails. Long story. I eventually got in touch with him again. So I'm getting all over the place. The point of the story was 3D printing stocks were big at the time. And I got this article in Forbes, and I wrote about the 3D printing stocks I was tracking without any expectation of anything happening. I'm like, this is just cool, right? I want to talk about what I'm geeking out on. And the article, I never thought I'd be in Forbes. And I never thought I'd be in Forbes again. So I made a list of like 200 people that I met over the years that had any kind of audience. And Tim was one of them. I sent it to Tim. I'm like, hey man, I would love it for you to share this. I don't know if I'll ever be in Forbes again. This would be really cool. And he tweeted about it. And I'm like, awesome. It's like 3 a.m. I'm like, dude, that's amazing. Thank you so much for tweeting it. It went crazy. It got read like 300,000 times because everybody in Silicon Valley was following Tim Ferriss, and they're all investors. They all had money, right? So inadvertently, I had created a run in these stocks that just went bonkers. So these stocks went up 10x in the next 18 months.
Yeah.
Not planned out whatsoever. And some of the people that read the article that were in this mastermind reached out to me. They're like, hey man, I just paid for my wedding with that stock tip. I'm like, I didn't give you a stock tip. You just read an article. I'm like, whatever. Anyway. So they're like, hey, how do I give you money to manage? You obviously are pretty good at this. What's next? Let's get some money working with you. I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing with that. So I go talk to my friend who was a floor trader at at Susquehanna Investment Group. He traded options in Philadelphia. And he was like, you know what you should do? Start a hedge fund. I said, hedge fund? Can I even do that? Like, don't I need a license? He's like, not really. I mean, as long as people are willing to give you money, here's the SEC laws, blue sky laws, talk to this person, that person. I had a lawyer. I talked to a few different people, so I don't want to put it all on him, but I got a lawyer, I got a third-party administrator, I got an accountant. I figured out all the different ins and outs. And basically the big key factor was, will people give you enough money to make this worthwhile? Right? Because it's not a cheap endeavor to get off the ground. You're talking 50 grand plus to get a hedge fund, formed and figured out and all that stuff. And there's a lot of pieces that go into it. So if you're not going to raise a good amount of money, let's say like $500,000 plus, it's not going to make sense. So I made a list again of 200 people that I thought maybe would give me some money, and a lot of them in this mastermind. And I went to them, and 17 of them said yes. I got better at pitching. I refined my pitch. I made the deal sweeter and sweeter. And we got 17 people in, and we traded options and equities. I was also partnered with another fund who had trained me on how to do this, and they were having a really good year. So we ended up with over 106% returns that year, which is pretty nuts. If you think about the S&P that year in 2013, I think was a 24% year. So we quadrupled the S&P. We had 1 month there where the two funds combined made like $1,040,000 in profit. It was just like a disgusting amount of money that I never thought I would make in my life.
Wow.
Growing up where I grew up. And it was that moment where we're here celebrating in New York City, living the life, right? I'm living in New York. I'm working in New York. I'm running a hedge fund. I'm like doing the most New York shit you can think of, on the Park Gansevoort Hotel rooftop bar by the pool, toasting. I think I quit drinking at the time. So they're toasting champagne. I'm toasting club soda. And I felt more empty, burned out, and disconnected than I ever felt in my life. And I just thought to myself out loud, I'm like, is this it? Like, we just made $1 million fucking dollars. Why don't I even feel like anything's different? Why do I feel more disgusted with myself, more burned out, more, whatever, right? And I had worked on some other aspects of my life. Like I'd worked on my health, and I worked on my finances, and I worked on other things, but spiritually and fulfillment wise, I was way off. So that was the turnaround point for me. I'm like, well, okay, I'm going to keep doing this. It wasn't like, you don't turn a ship in one go. It takes a while to turn. But I realized like, this is not the end goal for me. I can make $100 million and I probably wouldn't feel any different. Right. So that circuit breaker in my brain, that was like, money will solve all your problems. Kind of, you have like Tony Robbins talks about, you have a table. It's like a belief structure. Right. And the more legs the table has, the more sturdy it is. If you only have 2 legs, it falls over. 3 legs is kind of the minimum. If you have multiple references for a belief or an idea, it'll stand up. It'll hold water. And one of my legs had just been kicked out. Like, money was going to solve all my problems. So that belief was starting to erode. And over the next, let's say, year or so, I decided that hedge funds weren't for me. I didn't want to trade anymore. I was burned out doing that. It wasn't my best. I love talking to people. I love telling stories. I love meeting people. I love connecting with people. I love masterminds, but it wasn't for me. So I decided I was going to switch gears, and I ended up writing a big check to everybody. And by the way, when you're doing well and you're on a roll in hedge funds, like, I'd wake up with wire transfers from Switzerland in the middle of the night, not knowing where the hell they came from, and having to call all my investors and be like, whose money is this? And they're like trying to hide it from the wife. And it's like, not ideal for me. With the KYC laws, if you don't know what that is, it's like basically know your customer and all that stuff. So I was getting to a point where the hedge fund life was not all it's cracked up to be for me. So I wrote everybody a big check. I said, hey, we're done. Thank you for playing. Here's your money. They were thrilled, obviously, with the returns. They're like, why don't you keep going? I was just like, this is not it for me, for whatever reason, right? The spell had been broken. So I didn't know what I was going to do. I decided to start a blog, because up until that point in my life, I had done real estate. I had done hedge funds. I had done trading. Everything I had done was like hungry hippos, grabbing for all the marbles. Anybody play that game with the marbles, and there's only so many marbles and 4 hippos, you got to grab for all the marbles? Why don't I just make more marbles? There's got to be a world like that, right? Let's talk about abundance and like make more marbles. That's a pretty fun name, right? It's an alliteration, and the URL was available. So I started a blog called Make More Marbles. This is 7-8 years ago now. And I decided that, I was going to write about my journeys and write about what I learned and write about all this stuff. And I wrote a bunch of articles, but I didn't really have a theme. I didn't really know what it was going to be about. I didn't know how I help people. And I knew some things about marketing and sales, but I didn't know all the things. I had lost $45,000 on my first venture in internet marketing, trying to sell a course that I hadn't validated, and doing all that. And that's another story for another time. But I didn't really understand how to bring products to market, and I didn't really understand what my products should be. And I had a lot of internal stuff that hadn't worked out yet. So long story short, I landed in a Tony Robbins event. I had his book on my shelf for probably 7 or 8 years. And funny enough, all that time, the words didn't just magically osmosize themselves into my head, right?
Isn't that weird?
The message, right? It's even though I knew that Tony was awesome, and I knew that all my successful friends had read him, and I knew that there was something missing in my life, and I had success but not fulfillment. I was pushing off on the Tony journey. But when I finally went all in, it was because he wrote a book on money. And that was my gateway drug, because I was obsessed with finance. So I read Money Master the Game. And then I realized it's a 700-page book, and nobody's insane like me, and they're going to read it in 2 days. And then I decided to make an hour-long presentation for my audience at the time, which is very small, and send it out to them just free of charge. Like, hey, if you don't read this book, at least watch this presentation, because it's epic. Because he had talked to people like Ray Dalio and Warren Buffett, all these people that had never given interviews before, Carl Icahn and Mr. Templeton and all this great stuff. So I read this book, I make the presentation, and then I decided I'm going to make a course about that. That bombed, but I got business coaching and health. And I sold 5 and 3 refunded. So that was like my second big failure in this market. I still didn't know what the hell I was going to sell, but I went to the Tony thing, and I had an experience that changed my life. So I'm here at UPW, which is at that time, I think 3,000 or 4,000 people. Now they're like 30,000 people. It's gone nuts in the last few years. But people are jumping up and down. It's super high energy, and the music's loud. And it's like, what did I get myself into? I don't understand this. I thought it was going to be like Landmark, which I'd done before, where you sit in a chair and they basically berate you in front of
right,
tell you how your thinking is screwed up and make up language. Nothing against land Martians. I love them dearly. And I've done both the forum and the advanced, but the Tony Robbins world was totally different than any personal development type stuff I'd ever experienced. And I think it's designed that way, right? It's kind of designed to be a shock to the system and help you understand how your emotional state plays into, hi Sandy, plays into what you're doing and how important that is. And up until that time in my life, I had been all logical, all up here, all above the shoulders, all like masculine and surrounded by that. And I thought that was the only way to be successful. And then all of a sudden, just little bit by little bit, I started to understand how powerful my emotions were. And the big turning point for me was I met a woman there. So we're all jumping up and down. There's all this craziness. This woman just sitting there dejected, looking at the floor. So naturally, I'm going to be like, what's going on? Are you okay? And she's like, no, I'm not okay. I'm not supposed to be here. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, somebody bought me a ticket. I can't feed my kids this month. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm like, whoa. All right. Well, I don't know if I can solve all your problems. It seems like you're in the right place, but you mentioned your kids don't have food. That's not acceptable. So let me just fix that problem. If I can do anything for you, what's your address? I sent her one of those prime pantry boxes full of food, healthy, non-perishable stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if you run out, just send me a note on Facebook and I'll send you more. So we became friends on Facebook, but I never talked to her after that. Honestly, I forgot all about her. Right. So I gave her the food and then sent her on her way. And the event went by and we walked on fire, and it was really cool experience. About a year later, I'd been doing some more Tony stuff. I'd been doing more personal development work and keeping working on that plan. About a year later, I get a notification on Facebook, and she's live on Facebook, and I was tagged in it. And I'm like, okay, interesting. So she's in her car and she's, just faced the camera, and she's bawling her eyes out. And I'm like, oh man, here we go. And she says to me, she says, this guy, Brad Hart, who I didn't know, fed me and my family at a time I was ready to give up. Like I thought that was the end of my life. I thought I was going to end my life. I'm like, whoa, holy shit. Like, so I had this moment of like, wow, something that was completely like anybody would do, no big deal, totally forgot about it, changed her life. And now she's on the upswing.
Wow.
That's amazing. And that's the kind of impact you can have for people at that time in their life. I was blown away. So I realized like, wow, Tony's really got something on the ball here. The secret to living is giving, and success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. And those are the two things that just keep, banging around in my head. So I was like, okay, well, what else can I do? So I got involved in charities, right? Like the Greatness Foundation. You can see the hat over there. It says do great things.
Yeah.
So this is my friend, Mike Sherbakov. When I moved to San Diego, we got to be close. And what Mike and we do now, I'm on the board, is we build houses and schools and work in refugee camps and provide clean water and whatever we can do to help out around the world. And obviously COVID kind of threw a wrench in that, but I think we've done about 200 housing projects now.
Wow.
For people in different countries, and worked in, the Syrian refugee the Syrian refugee crisis out in Greece and helped those people, and built schools in Central America. Yeah. Just so like, you can't do it in the United States because it's ridiculously expensive and litigious, and the permits and, all that stuff is just makes it impossible for any reasonable amount of money to do real charity here. But you can build a house in Mexico for a family that's living in tarps and sticks in like a day and a half or 2 days. And now they have a house. That's pretty cool. Right.
Yeah.
So we did that a lot. Specifically in one community down there called Manidero on the Baja Peninsula, kind of near Ensenada. So, that's was a huge amount of fulfillment for me.
So you this might be, I don't think I've been so quiet ever in an interview, man. I normally am like asking all kinds of questions, but so you said when I moved to San Diego, you ended up like all of this was taking place and you were still in New York?
Yes, I did about 7 years in New York.
Okay.
I was in New York State my whole life, but 7 years in New York City.
Okay.
I kind of bounced around. I went to San Francisco for a while, tried to chase Tim Ferriss, be like a Silicon Valley investor. Failed.
Got it.
Yeah. I failed a lot. I'm leaving a lot out, but
I
went to San Francisco for a while. I went to Boston for a while. I went to LA for a while. I came back. I went to, New York was kind of my home base, but I was trying all these different places out.
Yeah.
And I ended up living in San Diego for like 4 years. We only moved recently, actually. We bought a house here in Phoenix. So that was our little sojourn out of the main areas that most people live.
Yeah, getting away from that ugly ocean and
yeah, well, everything rots, everything rusts. It's very expensive.
Right.
Our block is a $3 million plus house.
Fighting
against the elements. Where here we can get a brand new house for $500,000. So
yeah, right,
a little bit different.
Right. Yeah, I get it. So you moved to Phoenix, and that was recently, you said?
Yep, just in the last 3 months. So we moved here in April. We closed in May. Probably March, rather. Moved in April, and it's been great. Honestly, it's been 110 plus degrees almost every day the last few weeks. That's a little rough, but we're going to travel more in the summer. It's kind of like the opposite of every other place I've lived, and that the summer is too hot, and you go elsewhere where it's nice in those places. Yeah. And the rest of the year is very nice. So I'm kind of liking that.
So, I lived in Vegas. I know all about desert dwelling. So you have, and I'm just going to kind of segue into this because we're running out of time, and I want to cover this. I have your website, one of your websites up, the 8-Minute Mastermind. I have a mastermind that I do every week, and a training platform and all of that. But I'm curious, what in the world 8-Minute Mastermind means, number
Sure.
one. And number two, like, because I love masterminds. I'm in Jeffrey Gitomer's mastermind, the Little Red Book of Selling guy, and he's one of my best friends. And, masterminds work. Like, they work,
Great.
and people don't get it. They do not understand the power of it.
They've
So
probably
talk
never been a part
about
of a good one. Yeah.
what's that?
They've probably never been a part of a good one. There's so many crappy ones out there.
There are. So talk about the mastermind thing.
Yeah. So that first mastermind I talked about was called The Society. I was in that one for 3 years. That changed my life. So I started joining masterminds, just kind of anybody who pitched me on the mastermind. I was like, yeah, I'll try it out. Right.
Yeah.
And I ended up joining over 30 of them. And I started about a dozen. I started my first one with a coach who was dating through the Tony Robbins world. We ran that for a couple of years. I've run about a dozen, all from like 8, 10, 15 people, all the way up to like 500 locally that we meet every week, kind of thing. It's just wild, right? So I kind of became known as the mastermind guy, and I did other things like hedge funds and marketing and an agency at one point. But I kept coming back to masterminds, kind of like my first love. And then I realized one day, I'm like, wow, I know a lot about masterminds, and I started looking for like books and resources and topics and training on like what makes a good mastermind versus a crappy one. And I realized like all the books were okay. There was none that just stood out. So I'm like, I'm going to write the best book that's ever been on masterminds. I'm going to, take it all the way back to like the origins, Napoleon Hill, et cetera, Henry Ford, and to today, and give people examples and case studies and pieces that they can use and tools that they can use to run a really great mastermind. And I think a great mastermind, you can add a lot of stuff to it, but the main core things are the content, the hot seats, and the networking. If those three things are really well done and curated, the mastermind's going to be great. Everything else you add to it is fluff on top of that. So I wrote this book called The 8-Minute Mastermind based on the idea that I've done 10,000 hours of hot seats at this point as a facilitator. I can get people to where they need to be in 8 or 10 minutes. So I just call it The 8-Minute Mastermind. Also because it's kind of funny to me that, 7-minute abs, 8-minute abs, everybody makes that joke. Tim Ferriss is one of my huge influences for our work week. So I was like, 8 minutes is kind of cool. And then I just started writing a series because this became an international bestseller. We sold a lot of copies of this book. So I did the 8-Minute Money Manager as a follow-up. You can check that out at 8minutemoneymanager.com. That talks about my hedge fund. Let me give you
there. Hold that up again.
So I'll show you the 2 books here. So we got the 8-Minute Mastermind. That's this guy here. Move it back a little bit.
Yeah.
That's that. And then you got the 8-Minute Money Manager. It's interesting because it's like backwards. I'm looking at a mirror. But yeah, so that, and now we're working on the 8-Minute Marketer. So that'll be the 3rd book to finish the series. We'll talk about marketing and sales and everything I learned about becoming a top Tony Robbins affiliate and building book funnels and all that great stuff. So if you want to check out either of those books, you can go to 8minutemastermind.com, and then you can go to 8minutemoneymanager.com if you want to learn about money management. Was my career for a long time, and I feel like I have some interesting things to say about that. Victoria asked, your artwork is pretty interesting. Can you share about that a bit? So I presume you're talking about the artwork behind me.
Yeah.
So thing 1 is the lion. So hopefully that doesn't cut the video feed, but the lion is, you still there?
Yep, I'm here.
The lion was my girlfriend's response to a girl I used to date who was an artist, drew me this picture of a lion because I'm a Leo. And it was really beautiful. It was crayon, and she threw it together in a few minutes. She's like, I'll do you a better lion. She went and she found a paint by numbers lion and filled it out and made it really nice.
Oh, that's awesome.
The Buddha is just, I thought it was cool. It was at IKEA. There it is. Right. And then these 3 samurais I found at a yard sale. So they kind of encircle the Buddha. They were like these beautiful ceramic figurines, and my friend sold them to me for like $15 a piece. I'm like, $45 for this beautiful art. It's all ceramic. That's pretty cool. So there you go. I wanted something nice behind me, and there it is.
So talk about and I love Tony Robbins changed my life 30 years ago when I read Awaken the Giant Within. And I remember him talking about, I don't know if you've read that book or not, but he talked about his flying his jet helicopter over San Diego and hovering over the building that he had this, memory that he was a janitor in that building just 10 years earlier. And he says a lot can change in a decade.
That's right.
And talk about, because it can, I mean, it's just that simple. Life can change, and it can change quickly for the better. But one of the things I like to ask everybody on the show is, and I'm trying to be aware of the time.
We run a couple minutes over. It's not going to kill anybody. I'm trying to think about my appointments.
a lot of people get stuck, right? And stay stuck for life. They go to their grave stuck. And you know, my question is this: what, in your opinion, is the number one thing that holds people back from two different things: financial success and real happiness? And I do believe they're related. I do believe they're because I've been poor as hell and I've been very wealthy, and wealthy is way better. Way better.
But it doesn't solve all your problems, because there's only
Does
certain
not solve all your problems. No.
Yeah. Right.
No.
And really it just comes down to what's going on between your ears. That's one thing. But I think the bigger thing, if I had to pick one thing, is momentum. So we all are victims of momentum, inertia, gravity. There's all these forces that impact upon us. And momentum is, I think, the biggest force that determines where you end up, because people have momentum with their habits, with their beliefs, with the structures in which they think, their, you know, their jobs, their families, all the things that just keep them moving in a direction. And you have to be a little more creative than that. You have to think to yourself, all right, where do I want to end up? And okay, based on that, no judgments, just where do I want to end up? Is this current path I'm on? Are these habits? Are this, you know, is this routine that I'm in, you know, pointing me in the direction? You know, are these decisions leading to my destiny, as Tony would say? And if the answer is no, well, then you have two options. You can either succumb to that and just decide, well, it wasn't that important to me anyway. Or you could say, no, this is a priority. I'm going to change things now so that I get momentum in a different direction, which will lead me towards it. Right. And it's not about 100% gains every day. It's like, if you could just get 1% better and closer to your goal every day, just 1%, you don't think that's a lot. And if you plot it out like a chart, if you said, okay, show me the exponential graph of 1%. Well, for a long time, it looked like a whole lot of nothing's happening. But guess what? If you get 1% better per day for 365 days, that's not 365% better, because it's compounding. It's 3,778 better. You could be 38 times better than where you started in a year. In a decade, as Tony says, it could be a whole new world. You could be flying jet helicopters over the place you used to be a janitor.
Yep. So you're saying it's momentum. So how does somebody who, you know, there was this time my wife and I we'd met, been together for maybe a year. We decided to open an office and, you know, had a handful of employees. This one guy walks in my office, Brad, and he says, "Hey, boss, and this dude's huge, right? Way bigger than me. There's some dude out in the parking lot looking in the windows of your SUV." And I'm like, "So tell him to get the hell out of here. You're bigger than I am, dude." He goes, "I would, but he's got it blocked with his tow truck." And I was like, "Oh,
you're getting towed."
I'm like, you know, and dude, I remember in that moment feeling like this is the end of my life. It was the most humiliating moment of my life. I'm being repoed in front of all my employees. And, you know, in 2020, suicide rates skyrocketed higher than ever. And, you know, what about those people, like the woman that you met at the Tony Robbins event? What about those people who are barely hanging on to life, man? Life has punched them so hard, so many times, they don't know which way is up. What do you say if somebody is in that position right now? They're listening to this, watching you. What do you say to help them?
Get perspective on your life, because no matter how bad your life is, I guarantee you there's thousands of people living below the poverty line. There's thousands of people that don't have clean water. They got to walk 10 miles to get it. There's thousands of people that were born without limbs. You know, I have a client who has no arms and no legs, and she fucking runs mastermind. So I don't know what your excuse is, but it's not good enough. Right. So you gotta decide that you're not going to allow the circumstances of your life to dictate how it ends up. Right. Where you start up is not where you're going to end up. That's one thing. And guess what? Life isn't meant to be easy. There's no fairness inherent in life. It's not meant to be easy, but you can get better in relation to life. Life is just, it's steady state, right? Sometimes it gets a little harder. Sometimes it gets a little easier, but it's relatively steady state. It's not changing drastically from day to day. So in relation to life, you can get better, and your best can be better than most of what life can dish out in a couple of years if you really work at it. You can learn how to navigate this crazy world that we live in pretty quickly by learning certain skills. And eventually, you know, forming those into a network of, you know, hey, we have skills, we have processes, we have ways we add value to the world in exchange for money, which we can use to solve a lot of the other problems in our life. Like if you used to be really good at making money and helping people, which all wealth comes from benefiting others, right? Is giving value.
Yep.
That's really it. Like if you can just do that, the rest of your shit can be figured out and you'll have the time, energy, money, and other resources that are needed in order to fix the other problems in your life. So if you could just focus on that, like anybody with the internet today in a first world country has an insane advantage over even the wealthiest people that existed 1,000 years ago. You couldn't buy, with all the money in the world and all the gold in Montezuma's chest, anything like what we have for the average person today. Air conditioning, the fact that we have access to medicine, painkillers, transportation, food, that's non-perishable food that you didn't have to hunt for. Like, come on now. It's wild. Like, you have so many advantages. You can go to the free public library, thank you, Andrew Carnegie, and get on the internet and find resources for people in your situation. So the only reason that anybody's suffering, in my opinion, is really a couple things. They either have some mental illness where they're unable to take care of themselves, which I really feel for those people. I hope they can get the help they need, but the help is available. And there's people who just haven't decided to really just say, you know what, not another minute, not another second, not another hour of this. I'm going to go out and make a change. And I'm going to make a change, and it's not going to be 100% better, but it's going to be 1% better every day. I'm going to commit to that. And over time, I'm going to get the result, because I didn't get there day one. I promise you, I'm still not where I want to be, but I'm in a much better place than I was 10 years ago. And a much better place than I was 10 years before that and 10 years before that, because every decade I keep learning, I keep building skills, I keep growing, I keep meeting people, I keep taking chances. That's a huge piece. Like the only risk in life, there's really no risk, right? It's a zero-sum game in the sense that we're all going to die. Right. So what's the point of not trying shit? So it didn't work out. Great. You found another way not to make a light bulb. Took Edison 1,000 tries, and he was pretty damn smart. So maybe you could try more than once or twice. You know what the average number of times that people try things before they give up is? 0.7 times. It's less than once.
You know what though? That makes it a lot easier for those of us that are not afraid of risk to win. And that's
you win, you lose, you die. It doesn't, like, what does it matter? We're all going to die.
I agree.
Try. What happened? Like, did I know I was going to be a hedge fund manager? No. Did I know I was going to be a real estate? No. Did I know I was going to be an author, investment? No, I just took the next best opportunity. I just asked myself, what are all my options? What's the best option I can go after right now? What am I afraid of? Work through that, or get, leverage on yourself to just do it. And then realize, like, nothing's really that scary when you just try your best. And the crazy thing, the paradoxical thing is, like, I'm not the biggest athlete. I'm not like the best marketer. I'm not the best salesperson, but I try. I really give it my all, and I leave it all on the field. I don't want to live with any regrets. So I really give it my all. And I'm always shocked by how great I can do, how I can surpass even my own wildest dreams and expectations just because I gave it my all. Like, I'll just give a quick example, because I think a lot of people can relate to this. When I go to the gym, like Will Smith has a great saying, if we both get on a treadmill together next to each other, one of two things are going to happen. You're going to get off that treadmill before me, or I'm going to die. That's his approach to working out. Nobody's ever going to outwork me in the gym. Yeah. Like, okay, cool. So I took that same mentality. All right. I learned it from Will, and I went to my gym, and it was this big CrossFit type gym called something Burn Fitness or something. And we did this every once in a while. They would just randomly on a Tuesday be, like, hey, we're going to do a physical fitness trial today, and we're going to compete against each other. And I decided that I didn't care if I was the most in shape. I didn't care if I slept 4 hours the night before. I didn't care what happened. I kind of had to poop a little bit, whatever it was, right? I'm going to go and I'm going to give my very damn best today. And nobody else is beating me except through their sheer force of will, because physically I'm willing to go as far as I need to. Yeah. And every time we did one of those challenges, I won it. Not because I'm the most athletic specimen in that group. I promise you, because I'm so damn stubborn and I'm not willing to give up, that I win. And it just happened to be like some of the most impressive people weren't there that day. So that's helpful, but you can do more than you think you can. You have more potential than you believe you can. Yeah. Just think about how many human beings have lived through insane circumstances and come out the other side successful. You have it in your DNA. Just go do it.
I love that. Have you heard David Goggins' book? Can't Hurt Me?
David Goggins is a maniac.
He's unbelievable.
I love surrounding myself with people like that. I know real life people like that. Like my friend Kyle Duran was a Navy SEAL also for 20 years, but not just that. He decided, I don't want to just be a Navy SEAL. I want to be a JAG. So he became a lawyer, right? So he becomes a lawyer and a Navy SEAL. This is, you know what? I'm going to get a doctorate in tax law because I'm interested in tax law. So he became a doctor, a lawyer, and a Navy SEAL. He's like, you know what? I'm going to run the Iditarod race. A lot of people run the Iditarod race. It's 350 miles in Alaska through the snow with dog sleds, right? They have a team of dog sleds. Wow. This idiot does it on foot 3 times.
Wow.
One time he saved a guy's life who was stuck in a snowdrift and almost died. So like, he's a real life hero. Now he's the chair of the Iditarod Foundation. And he's up there, like, you know, bought 40 acres of land that you can only get to by plane. And he's got to like chase moose off his property, sometimes with rifles. It's a wild experience this guy has, but he's just a normal guy who decided, I'm going to be the best I can be at whatever I put my mind to. And that's it.
It's awesome, dude. That's awesome. Brad Hart. Hey, where can everybody follow you? What's the best place?
Yeah. So check out my books. If you guys have resonated with masterminds or money or marketing or any of that stuff, check it out. We have 8minutemastermind.com, 8minutemoneymanager.com, makemoremarbles.com is our main brand. You can check us out there too. I'm on social at facebook.com/Brad Hart. It's probably where I'm the most active. I was on Clubhouse for a while. We built it up and I'm just not as excited about Clubhouse anymore. But you can check me out there.
I'm with you.
It was cool for a minute and I'm just burned out on it. I'm around. Feel free to shoot me a note and happy to help. And I hope you like what I had to say and got something good out of it.
Brad, thank you for being here, man. Thank you for sharing. And I think you got some people fired up. You got me fired up.
Thanks, Ken.
So,
hey, go break down some walls.
Yeah, that's right, man. That's it.
And make some more
Thank
marble.
you for being here, man. Everybody, make sure you go follow Brad. Go to 8minutemastermind.com. I have it scrolling across the bottom. Check him out. Follow him on Facebook, Instagram, not Clubhouse because he hates it now. I'm just kidding. Follow Brad everywhere. Brad, thank you for being here, man. I appreciate you.
All right, everybody. Thanks, Ken. Have a great day.
See you guys.